Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
2-3 more
yeah.
minutes. Shreyushi, welcome. Welcome, Shreyushi. Thank
Hi,
you for
hi,
joining us.
hi, Sheshi.
Hi.
We just can't be like completely silent.
I'm saying I am seeing so many connections in the same frame.
Yes, yes.
Oh
I
God.
think
Good.
people have started joining.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. I was, yeah, okay. Welcome, people who are joining. Welcome, Priyanka. Welcome, Sai.
Thank you, Parvitadi.
And I'm just wondering if on the screen, just for now, Lupa, may I please request you to put on that visual of our children from Diksha just as people enter and we wait for maybe 2-3 more minutes to start?
Yes, I'm presenting.
Thank you. I kind of, as we wait, I kind of know Priyanka, but I don't know who Sai is. But welcome nevertheless, and thank you for joining us.
I just want to say that Priyanka is currently my colleague at the Hummingbird Foundation, but also a dear friend. So thank you, Priyanka, for joining.
Most welcome. It's a pleasure. I'm very excited to attend this session. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for
Thank
inviting
you.
me.
Oh, thanks.
Shall we say we start sharp at 5:05? I'm asking Karthik and
Yes,
Aparajita.
yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll start at 5.
Lupa, while you prepare to present, once we start talking, please make sure that you pin whoever is speaking, whether it's Karthik or Aparajita. Just, I mean, everyone can pin them on their screen, but we can do that from our side as well, I think. My God, the silence is deafening. I can see only Karthik. People see anyone other than Karthik's profile on the screen? Because I can't. Hello?
Paramatadi, I think there is a bit of lag at your end because already the presentation has started.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
she's putting on the pictures of the Diksha.
I can only see your profile.
Okay, I think you've pinned me. You can unpin me and maybe you'll see that.
I mean, I haven't done anything.
Okay.
I haven't pinned you. I haven't done anything. Oh my God. Yeah, now I can see. Yeah, it must have been the lag. Okay. It is 5 minutes past 7. Hello, everyone. Welcome to you all from Diksha, and a very warm welcome to our anchor for the day, Aparajita, and of course, our speaker for the day, Karthik.
Hi,
Um,
hi.
Both people very dear to me. Now, I think I don't need to say anything more about Diksha than what that poster says. Diksha is basically working with very, very marginalized young people to create a safe space for them so that they learn to identify, resist, prevent, and punish abuse and violence in their lives. So we're working in an area which is hardly ever talked about. We are a movement that's trying to create a space where young people teach us adults to change the ecosystem where we continuously tell young people to listen to adults because adults know best, quote unquote. Now, that has made us a country which has one of the highest teenage suicide rates in the world. And I don't think that's a distinction we would like to have. So, we're trying to change that ecosystem so that we adults learn to shut up and listen to children and learn from them, especially about the kind of abuse and violence that in various forms mar their lives, in forms that we are not very even aware of at times. And that is where today's discussion is situated. Straight away, it grew out of a discussion that Karthik and I had about how control and power is built into the Guru Shishya Parampara of the Indian classical arts, and how it stays completely behind the scene, never quite coming to the level of our awareness where we understand what children who are going through that tradition have to face in terms of abuse and violence built into the system of the Guru Shishya Parampara. Now, with that, I would like to welcome and hand over the running of this program to Aparajita, our main anchor for the day. Aparajita, if you've seen the poster, she has been in the field of social development for more than 2 decades now. She loves working with young people. She believes in the power of youth. And she's also a Diksha Dost. So with that, over to Aparajita. Thank you. I don't know why.
Thank you, Paramita Di, and thank you, Diksha. I once again welcome Karthik on this platform. And it's a pleasure to have a conversation with him. We often have this soul connections we have, and varied conversations we keep having. This is also a conversation that I was eagerly looking forward to, especially coming from him. So I just want to add, since I also know Karthik for now many years, at least 3-4 years, Karthik is an artist. And I think a truest sense of an artist is when it's not just about doing a performance, or so. He's a he's a Carnatic vocalist, he's a theater person, he writes, but in person I know that he imbibes what he learns, and he challenges things. He has been the crusader of things where traditional age-old prejudices are there. So he is someone who has done that, and being a person who is practicing Carnatic as a Carnatic vocalist, main thing that he works on, basically the traditional form. It's extremely hopeful to see that someone like a young person like Karthik, who is a crusader of breaking down these hegemonies. So personally, it's extremely it's a happy moment for me, but at the same time also, I think it's really, it will be an extremely critical conversation and great, deep conversations that we'll hear from him. So I'm looking forward to it. As much I would like to anchor, but that much I'm wanting to listen to him. So welcome again, Karthik. And just to begin with, these conversations started off with the fortnight against the children's protection week against abuse. We started with that in Diksha last year. And from there, the conversations were so interesting that in Diksha, we thought that why not continue this conversation, and taking the cue from Paramita, these words also, we believe that this should now become more and more a conversation in the public. It should happen more and more. People should talk about it, because these are not just marred with people from a particular section of the community. It exists everywhere. And only thing is, we don't talk about it. We don't know that we are getting abused, or in turn we are abusing someone. So it is high time that people beyond our sector, beyond the development sector, we talk about it. At least these things get voiced, because the moment it starts to get raised commonly, then things will get reported, and eventually, hopefully, we will be able to come to a position where we can prevent it. That maybe that's a long way to go, but at least we have to start somewhere, and I think this is a fantastic start. So with those conversations, something very interesting came up, and that's where I would like to bring today's thing to start. Is, as we were discussing in one of those conversations, we discussed about the power dynamics between the young people and the adults. And as you know, that in our society, in our culture, we consider young people as unimportant. We think that they don't know much, and as parents or as elders, we should guide them, and we should decide for them. We know the best because we have gone through those years. We have been also through these teenage years, or early adolescent, early youth, young age. So we know the better than them. So we try to tell them. And in the long run, what happens is we try to put things on them. And something which also remains untold, and most of the time not discussed, is abuse. Wherever there is abuse, wherever there is power, there is abuse, and there is discrimination. And that's where we would like to start from. So power over and power within. We had a fabulous conversation, and where we had a discussion around that how, as adults, we try to overpower young people, and in the name of being protection, in the name of trying to do good, we are doing a lot of injustice. So from that context, we thought that today it will be extremely insightful to hear from you, Karthik, particularly because you come from a sector where it's about music and art form, and there is this Guru Shishya Parampara, and there is definitely a power dynamics working there. So we'd like to hear from you, what has been your experience as a person who has been trained under gurus, and I know you're constantly learning. So would like to hear, and also the various aspects of where we are trying to put this today as the context. Yeah.
Thanks, Aparajitadi and Paramitadi, for having me over for this very critical conversation, because I think these conversations are very important and often do not happen. So for me, it is very important that we discuss these things over and over, because a lot of churning needs to happen. Where I have arrived at this conversation is with my personal experience of both being a student and being a teacher. I'm particularly not a big fan of the word guru, uh, or shishya, perhaps, because of the connotations that it carries. And I have, as a teacher, too, evolved now. And I must say that I had practiced all the possible wrong things that I'm going to comment on today at one point of time. And for me, it has been a learning experience. And through constantly observing myself and learning what I myself did, I have come to learn many important things that I couldn't myself earlier see, which was wrong with the system. One main problem that starts with what you talk about power is, already there is a imbalance of power when you're going to learn to somebody, because you're somebody who's seeking something, and there is a person who is more qualified than you who has to impart that knowledge. So already there is this power imbalance in the equation. Now, having established that imbalance, what is problematic in the classical arts? uh, I can speak more authentically about Carnatic music and dance, as opposed to Hindustani, because my insight into these worlds are very deep. What is very problematic for me is the romanticization of the term of guru and shishya. There is this whole romantic idea of guru being equal to God, and guru being the know-it-all, guru being the embodiment of perfection, and guru being like a parental figure, or whatnot, guru being everything that is possible. And you look up to guru as something, as your sole purpose of existence is dedicating yourself to the guru, and you being the chela. And this kind of romantic notions that have been fed into our psyche, it's almost like, I think, written on in our DNAs to be in this equation, that it's where all the problems begin. For me, what is very problematic is that in most spaces that I have myself been part of or have observed, what I can point out to you is, first, there is no room for question and answers. Straight away, a student will never be allowed to ask questions to a teacher very openly, because you just shut up and learn. So this is what is being taught in most of the cases. Of course, there are exceptions. Exceptions is never the rule. So there is always exceptions, but mostly till a certain point of time, you are never encouraged to ask questions. You have to shut up and learn what a teacher is teaching you. And what a teacher is teaching you is also what his teacher taught him or her. And somehow there is this pattern that has been flowing through generations, and we have to silently be part of this tradition, and we have to experience everything that comes with this package of what goes on in tradition. And what is this things that come with package, other than the knowledge of music and dance or whatever that you're learning, is there is, in a very very subtle hidden way, there is violence of gender, there is violence of sexuality, there is violence on there is violence of disparity, inequality, whatnot. It's a very complex mixture. So for me to frame it out and talk about it in general is a very big topic. So I would rather like it to be a conversation. Like, if people have questions to ask, then I can probably answer them, and through that I can channelize whatever I have to talk to. So for me, it all begins with how our classical music and dance is the whole tradition of teaching, or the Gurukula system in classical music and dance is so much a product of patriarchy. The entire structure is full of patriarchal ideas. There is too much of gender disparity, and even women who teach or who become gurus also, I must say, practice patriarchy unknowingly, and that is a very big problem for me as a student when I observe that. So there are so many things that are taken into granted. I have seen students being abused by their teachers, physically, mentally, in every other which way, and it some students take a pride, in telling that my teacher didn't teach me for 10 years. I was supposed to just do housework. I was just supposed to iron their clothes. I was just supposed to follow them everywhere they go, give them food, serve them pan and all that stuff. And then after 10 years, one day they picked up a tanpura and they started teaching me, and that is how it is. And there's such a romantic fascination while telling this story, which is actually very stupid. It is just pure abuse of power, because a student has come to learn from you. You're not giving him the space to learn, but you're treating him like a slave, and you're teaching him to enjoy this. And what the student in turn does is, once he has learned the craft and he has reached a certain juncture, he practices the same with his students. So this is a tradition that is going, and that is very problematic for me, and somewhere all this has to stop. And for me, that's why these conversations are very important. Now, I'm sure if somebody is listening who's a staunch musician or a dancer who's listening to this conversation, they might pounce on me and say, you are trying to dismantle a very beautiful system, a very divine system, a very wonderful aesthetic system, and you cannot equate this with just by talking. That is the whole problem. We are romanticizing everything. So since when did music and dance become divine? Why should it be divine? What is the purpose? What purpose does it serve by being divine if it cannot be simply human? So our question starts from there. And even before that, if you look at the history of how Carnatic music and dance has come to us, so there is a lot of violence ingrained in that history itself, which is not taught to students. How music and dance was taken away from a class of people who were termed as sex slaves or devadasis or whatever, and who were put under an act of immortality, and they were thrown away from this field. And a certain Brahmin sect took up all their art and started practicing it, and probably they like to say that they cleansed the art form and made it more respectable and started teaching it. And they started to teach what this caste or this class of people were teaching. They started to teach the very same things in a very Brahminical way, and then the music and art became very respectable. But till then, what was being taught by the Sadir, the Isavellalar communities, music and dance which were taught by them, was considered immoral and was considered bad for the society, and it was nicely taken away from them. And the Brahmins appropriated this art, and thus began this glorious tradition of Guru Shishya Parampara as we celebrate it today. So how this art came to us itself has a history of violence. So, but this history is not always taught to students with earnesty and honesty by our teachers, because we like to believe that the music has come to us from the gods. It is the fifth Veda, and Lord Shiva himself came down and taught it to his students, and then it came down. So there is this whole very romantic history that comes out of Natya Shastra and that has been taught to students. But there is this history that has a lot of blood and violence in it, is always not taught to students. So from where this romantic ideation of making this classical art as divine, it begins. That whole premise itself is wrong. And once that is established, once you know that this premise is already considered very divine and all that, now the position of a teacher or the guru, he's considered to be God himself. So he's considered to be an embodiment of the God from whom this art has come to him and or her. And now whatever she gives you, you have to learn to take it without questioning, without arguing, and there is no room actually for discussion ever, because so many times a student may not want to sing or dance what is being taught to them, because the whole idea of a current day young girl learning to enact what Krishna did to Gopikas, stealing her saris and harassing them in any which way, and trying to portray that with so much of joy, is itself a very a paradoxical situation for me. So do girls of today or boys of today who are dancing this really believe that it is okay to enact these stories? Or are there no new stories to tell? Should this art always be roaming around mythology and the idea of Sanskrit gods and the whole, the story of gods and their stories? And are there no human stories of today that we can tell through this art? If not, why? Why is it like this? Why is our art become so confined? At least in Hindustani music, the Khayal system has allowed poetry, love poetry, and songs on nature and everything to flourish. But in Carnatic music and dance, it is only gods. It is only gods all the way, and there is nothing other than that. And now, when these items are taught to students, so what is happening in your classroom? Who are your classroom? So basically, the classroom is also dominated by upper class people, rich people who can afford costumes, who can afford makeup, who can afford jewelry, who can afford dance, who can afford to pay and perform even in terms of music. So these upper class people dominate the classrooms. And when I say these upper class people, they're also predominantly Brahmin. That is also very important. So there is a domination of by Brahminical students in the classroom, and the other classes are just in a minority. And very, very, very rarely you will find a Dalit student learning Carnatic music or dance because there is no conducive atmosphere. So who does a Dalit student go to? If you go to a Brahmin teacher, how do they treat you? You can say that you'll hear teachers saying that no, we don't do this, we don't discriminate between our students, there is no discrimination, we just give art hopefully. But no, the whole structure itself is very, very problematic. When you're teaching a composition that is laden with Brahminical ideas and you're expecting a Dalit student to dance that or learn music or sing that, so what kind of violence is it causing in their mind? Do we think about that? Or if that student has to go and practice this in their house, so what kind of atmosphere is there? What does that student deal with? How does that student practice what is being taught in class? Or how is your classroom conducive to such students coming and feeling free and not judged by these classes and not feeling oppressed by these upper class students? So there is a lot in this dynamics that is so problematic that and there is no room for no sensitivity towards disability. Obviously, there is no sensitivity towards sexuality, sexual orientation, nothing. So you will not see many, I don't know of any Carnatic musician who's a star musician who's out and openly queer. It is such a rarity because the system will just not accept that. If you have to survive, if you have to make a career out of Carnatic music, you have to perform in these sabhas or these halls or under these organizers who are all predominantly Brahmin and who will expect you to behave in a certain Brahminical way, to dress in a certain Brahminical way, to appropriate everything that is Brahminical. And when this is happening, if you're queer, then it is out of question. So my understanding of how this whole system is problematic began with me accepting myself as queer. And when that happened, and when I came out as a queer artist, then this whole, the system started falling apart. And I started seeing the whole illusion behind this, what is being built up, such a glorious tradition of a wonderful history and everything. It piece by piece, bit by bit, it started breaking right before my eyes, and I could see the truth of it all. And when that happened, it was heartbreaking for me. It was heartbreaking for me as a student, as a teacher, and everything to see this happen. So for me, at that point, I had to distance myself from this art form for some time to really observe what is going on. And this is when I had a very soulful conversation with a dear friend and a personality in his own, T.M. Krishna. So I told him that I don't relate to this art anymore because I find everything so problematic and I cannot practice this. So tell me, what should I do? So he very beautifully wrote back to me and in this discussion told me that nobody can tell you what to do, Karthik. You have to decide that on your own. But let me tell you one thing, that sometimes you have to just accept that there is a problem, and that is a very good beginning. And once you know that there is a problem, and you can look at this art that you're practicing as a problematic thing, that there is a lot of beauty in it, but there is also equal amount of ugliness and cruelty in it, and that they both exist together. And if you're okay to practice it and engage with it with this duality at once, and you don't deal with the cruelty or the thing, you don't interact with that, you engage with what is positive about it and try to talk about it, and that is how you can build a healthy relationship with this art. So once I had this conversation, it gave me a lot of clarity about what I should be doing and where I should go. And that is how my new engagement with this art form began. So I started writing compositions that have to do with women empowerment, that have to do with sexuality, classical compositions, a queer composition, a very heavy Carnatic composition on farmers, and all those things. So I started writing all these compositions. I wrote a Navarasa poem from Shurpanaka's point of view. And what is a Rakshasi? Why was Shurpanaka called as a Rakshasi? Why was her nose cut? So these are the questions that are raised in these compositions. So such compositions I started creating, and I saw that there are a lot of people who are willing to engage with this kind of content. And I wrote a composition on menstruation and the taboos against menstruation, and all these. I'm very happy that people are engaging with these compositions in a small number, but nevertheless, that engagement is beginning to happen. I am providing a safe space for people to talk to me about anything they want, and I am engaging with students who are asking me questions. And I always have time for students who want to ask questions, critical questions. And my classroom is open for queer students and students from any class hierarchy in the society, and I'm willing to engage with them while respecting what they don't want to practice or what they do want to practice. So I'm willing to have this conversation. My students are always taught not to treat me as somebody who is above them, but somebody who is co-learning with them. I always write my students and co-learner. That is something that I very strongly do. I always want to engage with students, learn with them, and I want to break away this image of being perfect as a teacher. That is where all the problems begin. So I want to first of all break away this image that I'm perfect. I want to make it very clear that I'm not perfect. I want to make mistakes in front of my students with them and teach them how I am correcting, and also see how they are correcting, and sometimes how they might be better than what I'm doing, and engage in that conversation with them. Any composition, I have a dialogue with my students. I try to understand what is wrong with the composition, what is right with the composition, or such engagements always happen in my classroom. I have a lot of students who are queer, who feel ousted by the society, but they feel very free in this classroom, and they have wonderful conversations. So I'm doing that a very small part from my end to make whatever to bring certain amount of comfort, and to make something, at least to make some small change at least that is possible from my end. So this is the gist of what I want to say, which is it's very difficult for me to frame what I want to say, because the subject is so huge, and not to mention the intersectionality that flows in. So what happens to a Muslim student? What happens to a Christian student? What happens to a Dalit student? What happens to a LGBTQI student that comes to learn this art form? And what happens to an international student when he comes here and observes this? And it's like the intersectionality and the problems that come with that is also huge. And how abuse is never spoken about. It's all hush hush. Only in whisper networks you'll hear about it. Not even there, because it's so taken for granted that people are just okay with it, and they're like, yeah, this happens. Yeah, if you have to learn music, yeah, you'll have to sleep with your teacher. Yeah, if you want opportunities, you'll have to sleep with the organizer. So these kind of things are so taken for granted, and it's so ugly when you watch it, that sometimes you feel like you've become numb. As a generation, you've become numb, and how to undo this is a very big question, and it will take a long time. So having said this, I don't know, I'm just blabbering whatever comes to my mind. So if you any of you want to ask me anything, I think that will be a better way to channelize this conversation. Please, Aparajita Adi or Paramita
Now, with
Adi.
Aparajita's permission, am I audible to you, Karthik?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay, so with Aparajita's permission, I want to come in with a question. There are two things
Yes,
that are
please.
striking me very hard. One is that, in the psychology of education, we have a psychologist called Vygotsky, who has very strongly propagated that unless there is a positive and equal engagement with students, learning never happens. It could be learning by rote, but nobody really learns anything unless the student is positively engaged as an equal partner in learning. That's basically Vygotsky's theory. So what you're saying, what I'm hearing, is that that's completely out from this traditional system of the Guru Shishya Parampara. And so I want to ask you, from that perspective, how did you feel the negative impact of this absence? Thank you, if my question has made sense to you.
Yes, it has. The negative impact that the system had on me is very huge, because right now there are certain things that I look back of what I have done as an artist and as a teacher that I totally regret. And I shouldn't have done. But I did it only because that is what I knew was best and that is what was taught to me. Okay. So I know that how in my classroom or wherever I learned, there was so much of hatred towards Muslim community. It is so open. It is so grotesque, open, and it is shameless how teachers just talk about them, and how there is a them and a we. Always it's brewing, and a student is imbibing this without any knowledge. Most of the time, it happens like comedy. It happens as if though it is comedy, and you're just laughing at it, and without knowing, you also repeat those jokes in front of your students and in your friends and in your circle. And at one point, when you distance yourself from this whole situation and see what kind of dirt has been fed into your mind, and what is it that you're talking, so it makes everything very problematic. And to grow in an environment where I always knew that I will be never accepted as a queer person by my own fellow students or my teachers, it is very, very painful. Because when you sing, or when you want to dance, or when you want to express, you have to bring out your soul and be authentic. And when there is no chance for you to feel authentic about anything, because when the whole premise of who I am itself is hidden in this whole conversation, in this whole practice of art, then what is authentic about it? Everything is fake. Whatever I'm singing is fake. Whatever I'm dressing is fake. The circle that I am is fake. My art is itself fake. And it was till a certain point of time. Because I was practicing only something to appease to a certain section of people who I wanted to appreciate, and who I wanted to appropriate my art, and who I wanted to, I wanted them to be my godfathers or whatever, and give me a push in this career so that I can become financially successful or get a name or whatever narcissistic pleasure that I thought this art should serve me. So, what I know for sure is, by blindly agreeing to what was taught to me, and by becoming also a teacher who was imposing that to my student, I was feeding into narcissism so much that at one point it really got difficult for me to accept myself and to live with this duality of hating myself so much and still trying to project to the world that I am this very holier than thou artist who is great, a classical musician and whatnot, to put out this image of being very divine, to being very godly all the time, and knowing from inside that I'm not any of that. I'm not any of that. And this constant struggle within me broke me and took away a lot from my growing up years and left me with a lot of violence in my head. It is very difficult to communicate that. But I know what I've experienced. And every time I was on stage, I was feeling like I'm a fake. The same people who are appreciating me right now, who are thinking that I'm divine right now, are putting garlands on me, will just kick me out once they know that I'm queer. If I tell them that I'm queer, and I have to sit silently and listen to them bashing Muslims or Dalits and not comment about it, because if I do that, I'll be thrown. And then what happens to me? What happens to my career? So I always lived in this fear, and I always lived in this world of that, and that really made me a very dull person. It cut my wings. I couldn't think beyond a certain point of time. I blindly followed what was taught to me. If a raga has to be sung this way, this is how it has to be sung. This is how it has to be done. And I never gave wings to my imagination, because what was at the core of my existence was I'm a person who's an empath. So I like reacting to everything that is happening around me. If a butterfly is dying right before my eyes, or if I see a hungry dog, or a human being just selling vegetables, so for me that kind of creates this fire in me to create something. I want to talk about it, I want to capture this moment, and I want to write or sing about it. But this never happened then. I could never do any of these things because I was just dull. I was following what I had to do and what I thought was right, and I was in this own world. This Kupa Manduka, you are this frog in the well, and you just think this is what your world is, and you don't really know what is happening outside. And once I got out of the frame from this picture, when I got out of the picture, that's when I could really clearly see what I was losing out on. I was also judgment about my students who wanted to sing other kinds of music. I was judgment of my students who wanted to listen to other kind of music, attend other concerts and all that. And I've done all these stupid things. I've told them, no, you just practice this, just see this. From there, I have evolved myself to sing anything that I can and to celebrate students who want to try that and who want to sing anything they want. And so from a teacher who Vijayadashami is a very big celebration in classical circles in South India. So on the Vijayadashami day, the students come and offer their gratitudes to their teacher. So they come and give fruits and flowers, and then they offer a composition or whatever they've learned, or they restart learning. Punararambha, it is called. They restart learning under the Guru on that day, and that is a tradition. Okay. So I also used to do that. So as I sit in the center of the hall, and the students would come down, and then they would sing, and they would give flowers and this thing. It felt all wonderful. And then when this reality hit me, I saw the hypocrisy behind this whole thing, and I started breaking this practice. I stopped practicing Vijayadashami on Vijayadashami day, though my students were not very happy about it. But then I took them out for dinners, I took them out for lunch, and we just sat together and we sit over a cafe and laugh and talk about general things. And that is when I really connect with my students. And that is when you make this connection and you learn to respect each other and to love each other more than in this premise, in this costume party that you're having. And eventually, I also graduated to a teacher who would receive a whiskey bottle on Vijayadashmi day. So I kind of made this transition, and I'm happy that it happened. It's still a work in progress because I still learn new things every day. And I know there are so many things wrong that I still practice. And only when I observe myself can I learn from this. And about learning and giving positive strokes, I know it's very difficult because sometimes even when you want to be different, the students who come to you expect a certain thing from you because their parents ask them to expect certain things from you. They're they consider yourself a serious teacher only when you behave like what is imprinted in their mind as a serious teacher. So when I let them be free, when I let them fool around, or when I let them experiment, sometimes they're in a fix. But I enjoy that state of confusion. I enjoy that state of them having a problem with this, because I think in that state of confusion, I think something new can always come out, and I can always hope for bringing small changes in the state of confusion. So I certainly enjoy it. And Paramitadi, if I've answered your question, definitely what I felt was a lot of it put me in a cage. It put me in a cage really, and it really dulled all my senses, and I lost touch with reality. So that is what it did. I lived in this make-believe world, and I thought that was art. Well, now I know it clearly isn't. Word itself, it's a very classist word, I know, but yeah. So that is where I am at right now. Any other questions? I believe Priyanka Biswas has asked. And what made you recognize the abuse you were intentionally practicing? Yeah,
I
that's
think
something
you're
I've answered.
I think you answered that, Karthik, already. But still, Priyanka, if there is anything more that you wanted to hear from Karthik, so please feel free.
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
And others also. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think let us open this up for conversations and questions. I mean, Karthik, so wonderfully you brought in the various aspects, and the very problematic, romanticized way of defining, which is so ingrained in the context of patriarchy. And this is extremely heartening to hear that you are yourself challenging, and not that you were always right, but at the same time, it's important that we recognize that we need to change, and that is most important. And that's where I think you, as I said, you are a crusader, and that's fantastic to know that as a young person who is living art every day, practicing and teaching, and you are changing, you are trying to change, trying to question, and making content which is very different, and at the same time allowing your students not to get into the shackles of what we call as the very traditional form of guru is this and that, and this is how the guru kula will be. So fantastic. Thank you. Any other questions, anyone? Go ahead. Paramitadi, was there any other comment? Because you initiated by saying that you had 2 comments. So
Actually,
wanted to add.
Just to bring it to Karthik's and your notice that a listener called Apeksha has been agreeing wholeheartedly with Karthik said, and I want your permission. I want permission from both of you. A very, very dear friend of mine is a listener today, Ramki, who I know is also a practitioner of Dakshini classical music. So, Ramki, would you mind sharing your thoughts on this topic of discussion today? You would know why I'm inviting you. And I just want to add one line to that. And that is, Karthik, when you said that you felt fake, that moment of realization when it hit you, this is a thought that keeps bothering me. Much of what I do is very, very tied to this. So, a teenager, I'm just thinking, a teenager who may not be from a very high socioeconomic background, but wants to be a classical musician, somehow finds her or his way into this setup. And maybe she or he is queer on top of that. This constant pressurization would be one of the reasons, could be one of the reasons. I mean, we talk of academic pressure, whenever we talk of the high rate of teenage suicides in India, we talk about academic pressures, we talk about the pressure of parental expectations on our teenagers. I'm just thinking it's something that we always think as co-curricular, as relaxing. Even that can amplify that pressure to this extent. It can be another factor making a young person feel that, well, nobody cares. I mean, nobody understands me, which is very often ultimately the trigger for a teenager to take that drastic step, as mental health experts tell us. So listening to you it's illuminating, but it's also very painful at a level. So there is, I mean, something that we look at as relaxing, as additional, as opening up a space, can actually be so confining, so restricting, so devoid of hope. That's all. Yeah, thanks.
The pressure is huge, Paramita. You can't imagine the kind of pressure that students have and practitioners have. I have myself gone through phase of suicidal thoughts and dealing with this kind of depression. Seeking refuge with emotional eating, putting on a lot of weight, and cutting myself off from the world. So I have gone through very bad phases just because of the place I was in as an artist. So it is very difficult. The kind of pressure on you is immense, especially if you're from a lower middle class and you want to perform. So the struggle starts from there. So where are the avenues? How do you get opportunities? You need money for that. How do you get money? There is no government funding. There is no system for art funding in our country. So you need to have money on your own. You need to take money from people. And when you need to take money, you need to appease those people. And these people are invariably abusers. And they will abuse you with their power or in whatever way that is possible. And if you don't want to do that, then you're stuck. You're stuck again, and you don't know what to do. And now we've invested so much of your time in this art form. You've invested half of your life here. There's no way of getting out. You can't stay, and you don't know what to do. And that is when you feel like you've reached a dead end. And I see so many people who have arrived at that point. I see so many people who have arrived at that point. And especially if you're in dance, there's this whole issue of body weight. There is body shaming. There is skin color, racist shaming that happens in classrooms so shamelessly and openly that you wouldn't believe that we live in 2021. So it kind of happens in the open. And students can't come and discuss that at homes because they somehow like dancing. They like this. They enjoy this art form. But they also know something wrong is happening, but they don't know how to deal with it. And they silently gulp it all up and they go damaged for life. So that is very true. I know of many students who have attempted suicide, who have reached there, who have messed up lives and who have become broken adults because of how the system tortures you and has violence or perpetrates violence against you. So that is very true what you said. Ramki has written something. Karthik's experiences resonated with me as a fellow queer classical musician who only takes on adult students who have been deprived of opportunities to learn during childhood. Most are queer, transgender, and are upper caste, and are not upper caste. My last public concert at a sabha was a day before I was mentioned as a queer activist in the Hindu newspaper. No concert opportunities since. Wow. Yeah. Not that I regret.
He continues, he says also, Karthik, that not that I regret the concert opportunities. It's so much nicer performing at home and teaching.
No, that's very true, because at one point, even I don't regret coming out of the classical circuit as such, in music circuit, because who are my audience really? Who are my audience? The audience, it's the same set of people who are the oppressors, are the audience there right away. You don't have a diverse audience for a Carnatic. If I go to a Chennai during December season, who is in the Sabha? It's a Brahmin run Sabha, run by Brahmin audiences. Everything is do you think a fisherman from somewhere, from the corner of Chennai will feel even welcome in this audience to come and sit here, to be able to afford the tickets and to come and sit and listen to the concerts? No. So who am I singing for? So at some point it all starts seeming meaningless. So who am I creating this art for? What they are expecting out of me is the same old thing. And so if I'm singing for them, then what does it make me as an artist. At some point it starts seeming all meaningless, and this whole question, like, you start questioning it all. But then, like I said, if you've invested your time as an artist, then you have to find meaning, and you have to find meaning. And at one point, however insignificant you feel, I think we need to start making change in small ways. And that is the only way out, because only small changes will actually come together and create something big in future. But it has to start, and we need to make small changes, and we need to fight. And the question is not about giving up on things and becoming silent. At one point you have to fight, and whoever have the privilege to fight. Not everybody has the privilege to fight, and not everybody will be allowed to fight because of the environment we live in, the kind of political environment we thrive today in. So we don't many people will be just silenced in no time. So whoever has the privilege to raise a voice, whoever has the means with which you can communicate things, I think we need to constantly speak about it. And that is what I do wherever I get an opportunity. If I know somebody is listening, I make sure I speak about something or the other, and I'm constantly communicating about these things, because it is very important. Because the more we are silent, the more future generation will have to undergo this violence and this horrible system that is there. And I can see so many youngsters who are troubled, and who are going through such difficult phase in life because they do not know what to do with this art and the love that they have for this art. So if my generation of people, we do not do something about this, then the change will never come. But I have a lot of hope in the younger generation of artists who are coming, because they are willing to change. And I must say, social media is a very big boon in this endeavor, because it's giving space and voice to so many people who would have never otherwise found a voice. It is democratizing the space like never before. There are its challenges. There are obviously negative sides to it also, but to a larger extent, what I see is it has created a more democratic space where people can switch on their cameras in their house and they can just dance and not care a damn about the world. And you will have some audience who is watching it. At least somebody you want to watch will be watching it, and that makes a big difference for an artist. And so social media has definitely added a lot of possibilities to this, but it is a struggle, and it must go on. I can see Sai has written, how do we create visibility for queer marginalized classical musicians? Do you agree with creating alternate spaces? Or is assimilation and representation in the mainstream better? How do we create visibility for queer marginalized classical musicians? Obviously, it's more musicians coming out as queer will help, of course, because again, for me, the problem with creating alternative spaces is that I do not want only queer people listening to queer musicians. That should not happen. It should not happen. So that is also, again, problematic. So even if I create an alternative space, say I'm creating an alternative space, so what happens in this alternative space? That is also something that I want to understand. So now we have LGBTQIA communities and their pride. What happens there? How democratic is that space? How Brahminical is that space? Is that space any different from the mainstream, or is it just a reflection of that? So how do we break even that structure? For me, that is also very important, because ultimately we'll do a queer sabha, we'll have all queer audience and all that. And if it's only upper class Brahmin queer musicians singing, then what is the point of it all, actually? So for me, that is also a big question to happen. So if you want to ask, how do we increase queer representation? I, as a single person, cannot answer that, because I have a lot of privilege, and whatever I say will reflect my privilege as an upper caste Brahmin queer person. So it'll reflect on that, and it's not the same. I cannot speak on behalf of a Dalit queer musician. I cannot speak on behalf of a Muslim queer artist who wants to practice a Brahminical Carnatic musical form. It's very difficult. I cannot speak on their behalf. So I should not appropriate their voices. Basically, the only way this can come out is by a lot of such conversations, however small they are. Such conversations are very important, and lots need to be spoken, and people need to hear these kind of conversations, and only that will bring about change. Normalizing things, it will take a long way. It will take a long way, and unless patriarchy is rooted out, uh, things will not be okay. It's like the long. I can create an alternative space for queer musicians, but what happens to the intersectionality? What happens to that? So will a gay sabha accept lesbian musicians? Or it is so complicated within the community. Also, there is so much of problems. So patriarchy, it sits somewhere and plays with you so in unknowing ways, and you're just a puppet, and it takes time for you to realize that, and every day you keep realizing that in new light. So representation can only be, I think, improved when musicians come out and feel free and be open and talk about it and stop appropriating Brahminism. That is very, very important. I think that needs to happen first. A shout out and much gratitude to Paramita, who has been okay. But what about the power dynamics in classical music, especially during your training years? I spoke about that, Rudur. I spoke about that. Music is enlightening. I have a problem with that statement also, because art is just art. It is as human as any other thing. As an artist, I tell stories, I create art. A sewage cleaner will clean sewage, a nurse treats people. We are all doing a profession. Everything is enlightening. If a person does not clean the sewage tomorrow, we are all going to die of diseases. So his work is also as enlightening as me sitting in my privilege holding a tanbura and singing a Bhairavi Rag. It is also equal. So first of all, this romanticization of classical art or any music being great, that should first stop. Only then things will change. Just because I sing music, I cannot be great. I can be talented, I can be creative, and somebody can like it, can like my music. But how does that make me great? Or what is so enlightening about it? I really don't understand. I really don't understand. So I don't believe that any art form is enlightening, or any art form is spiritual and all that. All that is, I'm sorry to say, it's all bullshit, because I see people who talk about spirituality, music, and dance. I know what they do backstage. I know what kind of marketing techniques they use and how they sell the spirituality, to make money. I know. I've seen it all. So I know that this is all bullshit. So I don't believe in all these things. If something has to be enlightening, I think it is a personal journey. It is different to different people. And what it makes you feel is entirely your experience, and it is your journey. It has nothing to do with the art. Art is it's another medium, like all the other mediums. So first we should take it off the pedestal and put it with the rest of the things, and I think that will solve a lot of problems and a way of understanding things.
Just want to bring in Apeksha here. Apeksha, you wanted to say from a long time. Why don't you now share your thoughts?
Yeah. Hi, can you all see me, hear me?
Yes.
Hi, right now I'm anxious because I did not really plan to speak anything, but honestly, thank you for talking. I think throughout this entire hour, I'm just nodding. I resonate. I'm not even kidding. The entire hour, I'm just nodding because I am a mental health professional and I'm a dancer. I'm a counseling psychologist. So, I mean, what you spoke about, I think Vygotsky did make sense. And, for me, being an artist for all these years, learning from a senior guru was traumatizing, I would say, because of all these things. I really cannot agree more. I resonated with each and everything, and yeah, I mean each aspect of it, the way we are forced to behave in a class, the way we are supposed to, I would say, force. I have felt, I think, every single time on stage. I'm an atheist as well. Every single time on stage, I had to fake bhakti, and it felt horrible. I can even find myself choking now. It was bad, and every time I tried to have this conversation, I was shamed for it. I was shamed for my skin color, for my body weight, for every single thing. I just couldn't stop nodding, and that sucks, And it's been a year and a few months. I haven't been able to go back to dance. I love I'm a Bharatanatyam dancer. I'm sorry. I love the art form, but it's just been so difficult to go back to that because of all there are just so many restrictions. I'm supposed to be a certain way. I'm supposed to do certain things. I don't want to. I don't believe in that. And it used to kill every single day. Every single day. It just killed, to be that person who has to go and fake. I would openly tell this word now, fake. I was asked to be a certain way. And honestly, Karthik, I connected the first time I heard your compositions on Instagram. That gave me hope that I think I don't think I'll be leaving this art form ever. And I've told this, but I genuinely mean it right now. I canceled my appointment to listen to this because I knew this is something that I really wanted to listen to. And it just felt so validating to know that I'm not the only one. And it felt so hopeful that people like you are doing something like this. And thank you, organizers, for even organizing this. I'm sorry, I'm just going all over the place. I wasn't really looking forward to talk, but this just means so much. I think hope is the only word that is coming up for me. Like, you have been a great inspiration for that. And the work that you have been doing, I know that one day there will be a change. So, yeah, thank
Thanks,
you.
Apeksha. Thank you so much. Your voice counts a lot, and you should. People like you must speak out, and what you went through. I see so many students going through this, and it really hurts me because I've been in their place, and I can understand what you go through, and So this has to stop, and we all should get together and do something about stopping this in our own small ways. So my request to you is don't ever stop dancing. Dance the way you want, uh, dance what you want, the way you want, and carry whatever you want with all pride and give a damn about others. So I think that's the best way to do it. All the best to whatever you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. I completely agree with the fact that we need to start by having conversations first, and only that can lead to a greater change.
Yeah, we need to claim the space. We need to claim the space.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Karthik, Aparajita, you have to allow me to jump in at this point. I
Yes, please.
just have to, Apeksha, and I can see Sai
Please.
kind of resonating to that. So thank you, people. You know where it gives me hope? Because I say I'm just pushing boundaries for a world where every young voice counts. So when you young people think this is a meaningful exercise, just this conversation today, it just makes the silver in my hair probably shine that something somewhere is moving. So really, really thank you, Apeksha, for speaking up. Thank you, Sai, for expressing your resonance here. I'm hopeful that things will change, and I only want to add that I have shared the Diksha email here. The idea is not to carry the Diksha board everywhere. That's not what we want. Write to us so that we connect together and we make a movement out of it, wherever you are, in whichever way you want to do it. But I think we all need to be, satsang. There is too much asatsang, so we need to be connected together to break the nexus that exists and create a movement out of it. So, that email is just a way of connecting, and then we can. But I am old, but I am an adolescent at heart. So believe me, there's a lot of energy in me, and I'm sure we can make a movement if we all bring our energies together. So I just wanted to say that much. Thank you. Over.
Yes, thanks, Paramitadi. This is the Man Ki Baat that we need to have. Voices like Apeksha and Sai, that Man Ki Baat is so much more important than the other Man Ki Baat that we listen to. Anyways, so if anybody, Aparajitadi, if you want to come in, and if anybody has anything else, we can talk.
Yeah, I want to read out what Priyanka said. Thank you so much, Karthik, for such an insightful conversation. I love your candidness and commend the retrospection that must have gone into making the change from within you first. All of us are fake at some point or the other, but not all of us have the power to acknowledge that. And she thanked Paramita Dee for organizing this engaging session and also Apeksha for adding value from your experience. Any other questions or comments or thoughts from anybody else? Feel free. As I think, as Paramita Dee rightly said, this satsang should, is the Mann Ki Baat we should have always, and more the merrier, because the world is very brutal, and we have to make a lot of efforts to bring change, because we as human beings, we ourselves don't recognize what we are doing, because we are socialized in the patriarchal notion, and we start doing these things, not challenging these things. So it's very important that we recognize, and that is important. The conversation is important. Let us begin from there, and hopefully eventually one day it will become a wonderful world.
Yeah, Aparajit, I would like to pitch in, and I want to say something
Yes,
here.
please.
Please. Very simple things. Like on Instagram, I think for my birthday, one of my students from Japan, she gifted me a whiskey. So, and a pen or something. So I just put a picture of that on Instagram, and I said, this is what I received. And the kind of comments I got from other dancers, it left me, and musicians, it left me wondering, because they said, it's so brave of you that you put this picture. I'm like, what is so brave about putting a picture of a small whiskey bottle that was gifted to me by one of my friends? And then they went on to say that I like one young dancer. She said, I like to have a drink occasionally, once or twice. And after that, I deal with so much of guilt because I'm a practicing classical artist and I'm not supposed to do all of this, but I enjoy this. And I deal with this guilt so much that it breaks me from inside. And today, when I saw you post this, it made me feel so light. And I'm like, see, such simple things start confining you. Then where is this heading to? What are we making of a group of people who are learning this art form? Oh my God, the idea of morality and the idea of the thing that goes with this, it's alarming that I put a bottle of whiskey in a picture and they think it is brave. And they say that, I can't do this. And I'm like, wow, and actually that is true. 10 years, 15 years, I think ago, I wouldn't have dreamt of doing something like that. Because I would think somebody would come and kill me. That kind of fear psychosis rules your mind when you're in that circle.
Thank you, Karthik. This is, as you rightly said in the beginning also, that we put ourselves in the pedestal, because we are in the classical art form. Yep. We are one with the God, and we cannot have any, we are perfect. But in the end, we are humans. And as you rightly said, it's, music is just the way of life. It's nothing to, make it God or pedestal. It maybe that is a means to reach your God, to something that you believe in, the higher world, the higher power, the thing. Maybe that is a means to an end, but considering it as the end, yes, maybe that's where we, limit ourselves to grow as an artist.
Yeah, because as artists, as classical artists who dominate the this thing of this country, of the canvas of this country, when so many issues happen around us, how many of these star artists do you see raising their voices in support of things that are happening? They don't, because they just can comfortably sit in their sabha and sing about Rama, Krishna, and they're done. They're settled for life. They don't have to raise their voice against everything. What is this art actually then? I don't have food to eat. Eating is given by the farmers, and if the farmers are protesting, how many musicians will stand up and support the farmers? They won't, because they're afraid to be branded as anti-national or anti-government, because then they will not get their Padma Shris, Padma Vibhushans, or Sangeet Natak Academy awards, which is more important to them than anything else. So if your whole existence is controlled by this fear, then what is your art actually? So what is this art actually? So for me that is very important. So for me that is also something that I've started observing. So whenever something is wrong, then I see how many of them raise their voice against this. None. There is a occasional TM Krishna somewhere among the senior stars, and of course junior artists, young artists who are who are upcoming artists. So they're always, now you can see a lot of them raising their voice. Otherwise nobody from the senior this thing will even, they are very proud to say I'm apolitical. I don't know what even that means, and have a very strong stand against that word, but they're all very comfortable and privileged to call themselves apolitical and stay in their own hole. So that is also a truth.
Comfort zone. Why artists? How many people are raising voices to all these things happening?
No,
how many people even know? How many people even talking about it? And
no, but as artists, you have a stage, you have a microphone. You have a stage, you have a microphone, you have a following, and you have the privilege. And what do you do about it? Nothing. So then what is so enlightening, divine, and this thing about your existence? It's nothing. You're just sucking up to power, and that is what you are, and that is the reality of it.
Okay, so I must remind you, you had mentioned TM Krishna in the beginning. So let's mention him as a glorious exception to this rule. I heard him speak out very much.
Yes.
Take a definite stance against a lot of things that are happening. So, okay, I had asked Sai if they would want to speak, but Sai says that it's okay, Sai, because I saw you resonating. I thought maybe you have some words to add, but it's fine. If you're resonating, if you're together, trust me, I may not live to see it, but this world will change. I'm pretty sure of that. And with that, I just want to mention one thing, is that, we've had a series of, Aparajita mentioned in the beginning that we had a series of conversations. We are having a series of conversations around issues of abuse and violence that children have to face in various ways. Our first series of conversations that happened during the International Fortnight Against Violence on Women between 25th November and 10th December 2020, they were more focused on very direct forms of violence like domestic violence. But then through those conversations, we realized that we need to address the more subterranean forms of violence and abuse, the ones that are not so visible to us. So which is why these conversations, that is one effort on our part to bring these issues to, so Lopa thankfully has shared all these YouTube links. I don't know if you can copy it from here, but the idea is just to point out that all those conversations, including today's, will be on YouTube. Please join, subscribe, spread. These are all forms of taking the movement forward. We must break the status quo somewhere. So, that's all I wanted to add. Please do. I hope to see many of you in our future conversations, and also your comments and observations on our YouTube links. That's all from my part. And unless we have pressing questions and comments from anyone else, over to Aparajita to kind of conclude.
Just to be honest, I think I would say I'm speechless, actually. I was just writing that it's such an engrossing conversation. And, Apeksha was saying, they were all mentioning that they kept on nodding. well throughout the conversation, and just wanted to shout out and say that, yes, this is the real way that we are going. So thank you so much. That pressing comments or observations or any questions. With this, we might conclude. Unless Parmitani or Lupa to add some, this has been a meeting, hour and 20 minutes conversation. Forward to take this forward. The YouTube recording is available, and we can put it on the Facebook Diksha also. And we will continue with the sessions also, and please join us, because it's the in similar lines we will be bringing up, and this time we have wanting to all people from beyond the development sector meet up to the larger audience. So we will have exciting and enticing speakers, much like Karthik. So please feel free to join us, and let's do it all together. So thank you very much. Parmita Di, anything last you want to add?
So before Paramita Di, I just want to thank Diksha for doing all the wonderful work that you're doing. And such conversations are very critical, like I said, and are very important. And I'm so glad that I got to be a part of this in whichever way that I could. And I'm looking forward to all the other conversations. And I'm sure that lot of people are going to benefit out of these conversations. And these are really, really important. And cheers for doing this great work. And thank you, and lots of love for having me over here. And lots of love to all the people who have come and listened and participated over this conversation also. Thank you so much. Paramita Di, thank you.
Well, thank you, Karthik. And thank you. I mean, I don't know, Lupa, maybe you can stop presenting, please. Yeah, thanks. So just thank you, Karthik. Thank you, Aparajita, for, I mean, both of you are very busy people, I know. So thank you for making time for this conversation. It's been extremely engrossing, as I had hoped it would be. Just thank you, a warm thank you to everyone who has been part of you. Of course, to both of you, Karthik and Aparajita. But let's continue to be in touch. As I said, it's a movement that we must take forward. That's all. So with love and hope for everyone, for a better world, for the young people, I would say goodbye for today, and hope to see you again on different critical conversations.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you all. Thanks. Thanks and bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Karthik.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you all.